Okay, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Very Good Enough. I am Jessica Hover.
I'm Lane Dealing-Trilland, and we have got something special for you guys today. My friend, Jenny Tucker, is a person who I've been waiting for the moment to reveal her to you all, because she is just one of these women who is so eloquent and so passionate and so focused around her own experience and how that relates to everybody else's experience. And she has some stories to share today. She works in the community of moms space, and we've done a little work together, but she's just been on this really glorious journey the last 2-ish years. And it's pointing in this direction that is so poignant and so exciting and so exactly what everyone in this zone is going through together. So I've just been really excited to connect you all with her.
Yes. And you and I will both respect the rawness of emotion. So the way she's going to share, she's maybe 8 months postpartum, I think. I felt like I see what she's going through, and I remember feeling the way she feels. And I love the way she leads her community and the way that she is using the things she's experiencing to shape her city and the way that moms are cared for in her city. It's really beautiful. So you're going to love this episode. I'm excited for you to hear it. Where are the little ones now?
One is on a walk with my husband. He was able to take a little time this morning. He's kind of flexible this time of year.
Nice.
So they're on a walk for a nap. And then my son is at daycare.
Okay. That's so nice.
And are we recording? Are we good?
We're ready.
Oh,
okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for waiting for me. That was...
Yeah. That was 2 seconds.
We're here. We're figuring this out. Lane is the master.
I am such a novice to all of the things that are audio that I've learned how to use these things exactly perfectly. And then if anything goes wrong, it's the end of the world. The sky, it's a fallen.
From everything I've heard, you guys are very professional and into you're doing everything right podcast wise. I'm so impressed.
That's Lane.
Oh
if I was
Thank you so
left
much.
to my own doing a podcast, I would just be speaking into my phone. Can you guys hear this? Yeah, I don't know what I'm doing.
Honestly, it might be just as good. I can't tell if all the things that I'm following, all the instructions are just people making it harder.
Whatever you're doing is working.
Yeah, this is working.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Jenny Tucker. Welcome to our podcast.
Yes.
I'm so excited that you're here.
Thank you.
I don't even know where to begin because of how excited I am.
I laughed so loud into my listener's ear.
People like it. It's cute when you laugh.
I'll just tell the people. Hey, people, I have heard so many good things about this woman that you're about to hear. And so it's my personal honor that I get to connect with her in real life and hear about her. But what I just asked her before we recorded was, Jenny, how old are your kids? And how's it going in this fresh postpartum state? And so maybe we could kind of rewind there, and then you could unpack a little just so they know who they're talking to and how you're doing. And know that many of our listeners are probably right alongside you, juggling a lot of things, carrying a lot of complex feelings, and trying to just do their best in this whole thing.
Yeah.
So how
That's
are you?
Exactly,
and who are you?
Yeah. How are you? Who are you? I'm Jenny Tucker. Thank you for having me. It's so exciting to be here. My little ones I have a 3-year-old son who'll be 3 in September, and then an 8-month-old baby girl who I had in November. And we're in Santa Barbara. And I am doing, my answer initially when you asked that was, I'm doing better lately. The first 6 months of postpartum with my daughter were equal parts magical and so messy. And what I also started saying was that it felt like with having my second baby and sort of kind of knowing what I was getting into, but also not, because you never really know. Even when it's your second baby, you're like, oh, I got this. I've done this before. And then it's like, nope, here's a bunch of stuff you didn't know was going to happen or that you didn't know you were going to feel. A lot of stuff I feel like unloaded from my first postpartum experience, especially because since then I've been working with moms and around moms and learning so much about matrescence and birth and postpartum and all of it, that I felt like I had this big giant toolbox going into this most recent postpartum experience. And that both allowed me to like feel more prepared, but also like because I could go deeper in all of these things, it was like way more messy. It was almost like ignorance is bliss, like
Yeah.
the first time, but being like, oh no, now I know all these things. Like I feel it even deeper. It was equal parts like magical to be able to heal from some stuff from my first baby and having a baby in the pandemic and just not knowing at all what motherhood was going to be like. But also like knowing some of the things that I knew, like it made it extra hard, if that makes sense. Like I was so aware of some of like just the things in the world that make motherhood so hard, rather the first time I was like, why is this so messy? I wasn't expecting this. This next time I was kind of like, okay, no, now I know these things, and like I feel the rage about it, or I feel extra like deep sadness about certain things. Like, so yeah, I like to say for a lot of motherhood that it's equal parts magical and messy. Like I feel like that applies to most experiences as a new mom.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you touched on that you work with moms. What does that look like for you?
Yeah. It is ever evolving, but my business is called the Centerline Community. It is a support community for new moms. We have a physical presence here in Santa Barbara with meetups, events, education, workshops. I'm planning a mom's night out at the Silent Disco in 2 weeks. Like we do everything. We do birth workshops. We work with a lot of local providers just to empower, educate, and connect new moms. Because what I found with my first baby, and of course during the pandemic, it was so isolating to get pregnant, have this whole world of birth and postpartum and all the preparation and research and stuff you're going through. And even though half the population basically has babies, and they have been forever and ever and ever, like no one still talks about it enough. So you just feel so alone, even though everyone around you is having babies. Like it's how humans continue to live on earth. But like somehow when you get pregnant, you just feel so alone. And then you have a baby, and somehow you feel even more alone, even though the baby's here and you're not alone, because there they are. So I felt that during having my first baby. And I started this community alongside my friend, who we got pregnant at the same time, and had this like, we taught yoga together at a local studio, and had this beautiful vision for like, let's do some prenatal yoga workshops and maybe do like some support group type stuff. And then that was in February 2020. So then of course, March 2020, we're both like 2 months pregnant, and we're like, I guess that stuff can't happen. And it kind of evolved into this virtual yoga class / support group. And then that was, over 3 years ago. And we have over 600 members of this mom group now. And like I said, it's, when you asked what that looks like, it evolves every day, because with our own journeys and my own journey, it's been the support we've been providing has been evolving based on what we feel and what we see. So, we have this physical presence in Santa Barbara, and then I run alongside other group facilitators, 8-week prenatal, postpartum, toddler mom, birth support groups, just based on, again, whatever like pulse that we're feeling within the community of what people are needing at the moment. We like kind of create groups and spaces virtually around that to support moms. So it's kind of this thing I didn't plan on starting that has just blossomed as I've blossomed, and alongside some other beautiful mothers, like on this messy and magical journey. So I run the Centerline Community, which is the short answer to that, of what it looks like to work with new moms.
Amazing. And Lane, then what's the connection? You guys clearly are good friends.
Well, the funny thing is that we're very attached to one another. And actually, when I think about it, our experiences together have been few. Maybe like 6.
Really?
But my feelings for you are very strong.
Yeah, that's how I know about you.
Yeah. So we met really toward like, I feel like Bowen was maybe a year and a half old when we met. So like that's kind of the timeline of if you started Centerline when you were pregnant and now this baby's out and about that old. Just connected through a friend.
Okay.
And it was like sort of at the beginning of Enquiry also, where I was like starting to feel like, I don't know if this is curriculum, like what do people need? And then just kind of like trying to tap any resources I had for getting in contact with moms and being like, can I just like say my stuff and then see what you guys like, what matters to you? And then what you're like, that's not interesting to us, please don't. And so Jenny was just starting to do some of these, or you had done a few of these like containers with moms, and your children were aging toward toddler. So you had done a bunch of baby stuff already, which actually is almost the exact same story.
Totally.
With you, Jess.
You gather a bunch of like, expectant moms, walk them through babyhood, and then they become toddlers. And then all the moms are like, what do we do? And then we're all like, I don't know. They call Lane. Like,
let's try to figure it out together.
Yeah.
So Lane was a huge piece of, because we had this kind of cohort of moms who we started Centerline with. And then, all of our babies were like aging out of this baby area and, newborn and all the stuff. And then we're like, oh my God, now what? And so Lane was one of the people who like helped bridge, like, okay, wait, this new motherhood piece, it doesn't just apply to the first year. Like we need this kind of support, especially through toddlerhood. And what I'm guessing is going to be through every avenue of motherhood as our children get older. Like, so Lane was really instrumental in helping us like create a new type of container that's like, oh my gosh, all these toddler feelings and all these feelings I'm having as a new mom, trying to hold their feelings, and what's gentle parenting and what's my toddler going through. Like Lane was so, for me personally, having conversations with you, which I feel like is why we feel so bonded, because I felt so able to just tell you, here's how it's going for me, and you understand because you understand toddlers. Like, so personally we were able to bond, and then for you to help hold that container through Centerline for these new moms who all of us were like, help us. You were able to like ground us. Like I still come back to something you told us in one of those first groups, which is about the sea cliff, which I know you guys have talked about too. Like my husband and I literally will text each other like, you are the sea cliff, you are strong. And you can, explain what the sea cliff is, but that really stuck with our whole community. Like that's brought up all the time.
I love that. I love it so much. That's good luck everybody trying to decide who's talking now when we're saying the same thing at the same time. That's how we know each other. And I just feel like some of those first conversations, it was like so fortuitous when we met. I feel like we were both like so open and fixated on like, oh my gosh, I have a thing and I need a thing, and how do we move? There's this need, and how do we move forward? So those conversations were just like very heightened and very rich and very bonding and exciting. But it's been really cool over the last year of just like watching your content really and talking with you a few times to see this shift in your tone. Like I feel like I could really see and hear you talking your way through being like, I'm having a similar birth in certain ways because of certain things that I have going on, and yet I feel so differently. And that like very proper and righteous rage that started to come in of being like, oh no, I know what's happening now, and that's what happened to me last time, so I'm mad about before, and I'm mad about now, and I'm mad for everybody else. And I have chills because the advocacy in your tone like really shifted, where before it was mostly like, and I feel like a lot of people who work with women ever start this way of like, oh, sweetness, like women are so lovely and we love them so much. And then you dig into what's really happening with women, and then it reflects back to you, and you're like, oh, and me, but also you. And then it does morph into this like kind of mature indignation of like, oh, we're people, this shouldn't be happening to us.
Yeah.
And I would love to hear a little bit more from the inside about that journey for you and what that's looked like, trying to advocate for yourself differently in this birth, and then
I don't know anything about this. So me and our people, this is brand new. So tell us everything.
Yeah. Okay. The rage. Yes. There's been, I feel like I can think back to, I said I had my first baby in September 2020. So that was like a very like, as we all know, like weird time. And it was just so focused on like me and my husband and my baby and like our bubble and keeping us safe. Right. And like was not tuned in really in that postpartum experience to like what was going on, like, and bubbling up like within my heart, within just like kind of this, if some people listening can relate, like spiritual like space that the early postpartum is. It's like you're opened up and raw, obviously through birth, like your body is open, and mine was open specifically via C-section. Like, my guts are like on the table and like, and then after that, and these, especially those first few weeks, and then really those first several months. And what I've come to learn and experience in my own body is like, at least up to 2 years, I feel and believe that like women are open to the world, to like whatever, I don't know, like whatever, like, I don't know the right words to say, like, because it is so like, again, with the messy and the magic, it's like, were just open and raw in a different way in those first 2 years, especially those first, let's say few weeks, few months. And then what I felt the first time was kind of like, I felt forced to like close that. I felt like a little bit of that opening, but then again, was like, I was so focused on keeping my baby and my partner and I safe, and like kind of blocked out some of that magic that was like trying to seep in of like, oh yeah, you just had a baby and you're on this new like path to a new identity as mom. But also there's like things happening within you that are like, trying to heal from previous parts of your life, or like things that you're mad about how your birth went. And like, but like I was blocking them out because I was so kind of fight or flight / freeze, like with protecting my baby. So for this next round of baby making, like got pregnant, was ready to have my baby, and like stuff started coming up in my pregnancy again, because I was also like so aware, because I've been working with so many moms since having Bowen and then getting pregnant with my next baby. It was like, I was like ready to be like, to feel that rawness, if that makes sense. I don't know if any of this is making sense.
It does. Absolutely. One mom who just came to a meetup, she described it as feeling like an exposed nerve. Like all of a sudden you have your baby and you're just like, even the wind hits you different. Everything hits you different.
Exactly.
So totally relate and understand.
Yeah. So the first time it felt like I felt that rawness, but I was like forced to kind of like close that door and just like harden, if that makes sense. But then when I got pregnant with my next baby, I was like, okay, I want to like soften into it this time. And what happened with that came up was, as I was going through my appointments and sort of like seeing what was coming up as I grew this baby in my body and like got ready to birth it and like wanted to be open to what was there, I felt a lot of rage, a lot of disconnect to the world around me, and a lot of anger for myself and for what I saw other moms experiencing like in their pregnancy and postpartum journeys. Because while I'm pregnant with my second, I'm leading these support groups and hearing these stories of moms and, birth trauma or disappointment around people being, there for them or not there for them, or giving support or not support in the ways that they need once their baby got here. And like all these continued stories of like this, what felt like square peg, round hole of like women having babies and like not being either acknowledged or supported or feeling valued. And meanwhile, like having my own babies and looking at my growing body the second time and being so tuned into what's happening and feeling this disconnect myself with just like being a woman in the world and doing this most important thing of growing and having babies and watching hundreds of them do it around me and giving my whole heart to support them in these containers within our community and feeling this constant disconnect. And one thing I know that Lane and I have talked about specifically, and that she's tuned in with our community here in Santa Barbara, was I had a C-section with my first baby. He was breech. That's what happened. And then with my second, I was really hopeful for a VBAC, so vaginal birth after cesarian. So specifically, some of the rage I experienced, both for myself and for other moms navigating similar stuff, was our hospital here had, up until a few weeks ago, which we can talk about, a official / unofficial ban against VBACs, or TOLAC, which is trial of labor after cesarean. So most hospitals in California and in the country allow moms who have had one C-section to have a trial of labor. So meaning if I had a C-section and there's no medical reason for me to have a second one, instead of just saying, let's do another one because that scar is already there, I can try for labor, which I wanted to do. I wanted to have a vaginal birth if that was an option. And our hospital here, up until a few weeks ago, had a 23-year ban against. So 23 years ago, they said, no, we don't do those anymore. Women can't they can't try for labor after they've had one C-section. So that was a big source of this rage and like sort of a gate for me into like, okay, this feels like a violation of my rights. Like this feels like a decision you can't make for me, hospital. And it was sort of like a big, what Elaine was speaking to as far as the Centerline Instagram and my experience and like advocacy, kind of went down this road while pregnant and feeling all the things anyway of like there are lots of problems with the way the world treats new moms, and like I'm feeling it and I'm seeing it and I'm mad about it. So a lot of that, the pregnancy for me this last time was that. And then I ended up like kind of fast forward, needing another C-section for other medical reasons, the TOLAC or VBAC wouldn't have been an option for me. And yet our hospital was still not allowing it during the time I had my baby, which I was told it would be an option. But again, it wasn't an option for me because I had other stuff going on. But I was enraged for the moms around me who are having C-sections that didn't need them. So here I am going in the hospital, scheduled my C-section, going in kind of reluctantly still, even though I knew that medically it was the best choice for me. Like I did have a lot of reflecting there. I thought about going elsewhere to have a vaginal breech birth and different things, but ended up being at peace with scheduling my second C-section and then really advocating for like feeling like, okay, if that's the route I have to take, then I'm going to take as many things into my own hands as I can, which was me advocating for skin to skin after my C-section, like immediate skin to skin, prolonged, whereas typically at our hospital after baby's born and pulled out of you, they like put him on your chest for a second. And with my first, they wheeled him away for an hour while I got stitched up alone. So this next time I was really passionate about advocating for that to go differently, and met a lot of resistance in that and saw a lot of moms try to do something similar and be denied. So there was a lot of feelings and rage around that. And yeah, I feel like there's so much here, but any thoughts or questions so far with what I've said?
Can we hear more about just that part right there, the experience of being in the hospital and what it looks like and what it takes to try and get that for yourself and what comes back to you like that? I'd love to hear just like the step-by-step of that conversation, that process.
Yeah. So once I like was at peace in my heart of like this second C-section is going to be the best, it's going to be the most empowering situation for me. Then it was like, okay, what does that look like? How can I, like, again, with that word empowerment, like, how can I make this my birth, even if I have to be on that operating table again, which wasn't what I was hoping for. So I have a friend and doula and postpartum nurse in town. Her name's Krista Tarantino, who previously worked at the hospital and then for similar reasons that I'm mentioning, left the hospital to work in home and one-on-one with women, doing doula and nurse work and lactation. She and I have grown really close and she sort of helped me. Like I told her, this is what I want. Like I want to make this a mother-centered cesarean. Last time it did not feel mother-centered or even baby-centered. It was like surgery-centered. It was like we were on their schedule. I had no idea what was happening. And again, I had my first baby. Like I just wanted to leave the hospital with a healthy baby. And now looking back, I'm like, that is the bare minimum of what any mom should want going into the hospital. Like we deserve so much more than that. So that's what I was that's what I was after for myself. And then to hopefully have that start a new trend for moms to go into the hospital and say, even if I'm having something like a C-section or just a hospital birth, like I want for myself and other moms for that to be mother-centered. And it felt like the hospital setting, at least my last experience and what I've heard from so many moms I've worked with, that it was just not, I was gonna say not always the case, but it's like barely ever the case. Like, so I felt like I had to come in like just with my kind of armor and like with Krista as my advocate and like, we had to come in like fighting to have this be an experience that I was going to be excited about and proud of and feeling safe with. So that looked like talking to Krista about, hey, what are things in the hospital that I have control over? You worked as a postpartum and labor and delivery nurse for 10 years. And her first answer was like, you have control over everything. Like, this is like, this is your body and your baby. I'm like, no, but they said this, and that. My doctor has told me this is allowed and this is not. And she's like, no, you get to decide what's allowed. Like, it's not their choice. So there was at first like a lot of unlearning, whether it was language or just like stories I had around what I had control over, when in reality, like I still have trouble learning that at my own doctor appointments. Like I have control, like they are not in control. It's like a lot of unlearning around, especially with birth, because can be such an out of control experience, especially when you're told you need a C-section. It's like, that wasn't what I was planning. So that looked like her kind of coaching me to be like, no, this is your experience. And then me using different language and like coming in differently to my prenatal appointments to say, this is what I want to have happen, not can this happen? So I had to like kind of muster up everything I could, like, and use that rage and like my experiences from the past and stories I had heard from other moms to be like, no, okay, I'm going to go into this differently and like kind of use this as an experiment to be like, can't like let's see how they react when I say, no, this is what's going to happen. And I met a lot of resistance with, no, I want my baby on me immediately after the C-section. They would say, well, we can't do it until this time. I'd say, no, that's not good enough. They'd say, okay, well, maybe this time. It was like this negotiation. And I carried that through every prenatal appointment and still just met all this resistance, but came in to my surgery saying, I want my baby on me as soon as possible, which again, like met so much resistance from even the morning of my surgery, met like the nurses were like, well, we're going to have to see. I'm like, yeah, I get that if the baby's in distress, things will need to happen. But like, I'm saying if everything's okay, I want my baby on me immediately. And it was still like, well, we're going to see. It was like, yeah, no, I get that. But like, why can't anybody say like, yes, we're going to work to make happen what you want to have happen because you're the mom and this is your baby. Like no one was on, even the most supportive caregivers in that room and in that hospital. Like it was like, again, this unlearning that needed to happen that like, this is my experience, not the hospital or the insurance or the doctor's experience. So there was a lot of like, it was coming out the other side. I was able to, for the most part, have the experience I wanted. So like my goal was to have the baby come out of my incision and straight onto my chest. They were like, well, we need to like make sure the baby's breathing. I was like, okay, I can deal with that. I can deal with 60 seconds, milk the cord, and then put them on me. Even though I knew like, well, you can actually put them on me while the cord's still attached. And like all this research I had done, right? Of like, it's healthiest for baby to be right on me. If baby was in distress, like the World Health Organization says straight to me is the best place if that were to happen. And yet the hospital is strict with their policy of no, they need to go to the warmer. It's like, it's actually not the safer place for them to be, but like this is your policy. And that's the type of resistance I kept meeting. And so I was able, at 1 minute I want a baby on my chest, but the part that I think I could have now going through it, and if I ever had a third C-section, which I don't think will happen, don't know that I'm signing up for that. If I had a third baby, I'd probably maybe do a home birth, but we can talk about that too. But at 5 minutes, they were like, okay, we can bring your baby at 5 minutes. And they were like, we got to milk the cord. And then, which I actually made sure they did milk the cord for 60 seconds, which is just leaving the baby attached to the placenta, which was in my body. And then after 60 seconds, cut the cord. I wanted her to come straight to me, but they said, no, it's protocol. We cannot budge. She has to go to the warmer for 5 minutes. And we have to take all the APGAR scores and everything, which I knew, again, they could do on me, but it's like, this is their protocol. Again, not centered on baby or on me. Scientifically, it's healthier for her to come straight to me, but like their policy is to go to the warmer. So things like that are what, like, and me knowing that that's their protocol going into it and then watching it happen, it was like, this is the rage that's still inside of me of like, why is our world focused elsewhere, not on health of mom and baby? So I was able to get her to me at 5 minutes, which was a win because last time my son came to me wrapped up in a blanket. We took a picture cheek to cheek and then he went away. And then when I asked later, like, why, they're like, oh, that was just like kind of the easiest thing for us to do to like get all our data in the computer. It's like, okay, so I laid there alone, not knowing at the time that was major trauma for me, like not knowing until this next birth, which I'm like, I can picture laying there this time with my daughter and her coming to me and staying on me. They tried, we counted 20 plus times for those next few hours to take her off me to say, oh, we got to measure her hips now. And I was like, no, you don't. This is where she needs to be. No, you don't. No, you don't. Over and over. Wow. It took so much in me. And here I am again with my guts on the table and my belly cut open and everything happening. Like she's on my chest. I knew that's where she needed to be. And picture, like I was taken back to when my son was just taken away right away for no medical reason, only that protocol was easier on the staff at the hospital. And like in that moment, I healed so much from that first experience, which again, I didn't know needed to happen because I had been so like kind of I felt like maybe that whole time I was like protecting my heart from that trauma the first time because I was just so in survival mode with my first baby. So I was able to heal in this second birth, but also be reignited, like that rage and anger and pain was reignited at the same time, which I feel like has to happen in order to heal, right? Like it has to resurface. So like all that's happening in my birth and then continued through really the first 6 months of my postpartum with my daughter. It was like when I talk about guts on the table, it felt like everything just stayed up on, again, with the nerve endings, like my skin stayed and really still has been, maybe until recently, like, you know, skin inside out, guts on the table, like feeling all these things for myself and for other moms. And really a lot of it, like I said, is like square peg, round hole of like moms and babies. And then like the way the world, like the way that we're expected to participate in the world and the systems that are set up to support us that actually don't support us. Like so much rage and emotion around that, both for all these moms that I'm leading and then in this postpartum experience, like for myself and my baby. So it's again, with the mess and the magic, it's been all of those, because the healing has been there, because I'm so aware and feel in control of like, okay, I can be aware of these things and like help myself through this and be vocal about it. Like that has been healing, to be vocal about it with other moms and help them kind of come to the place that I was able to come to through this experience. But then it feels like when we do that, that like we're just, everybody's guts are on the table, because it's like, oh my God, now what do we do with all this? Like there's so much pain. Like for me recently too, it's been like, I've had other facilitators leading my groups. I thought, you know, I had my baby in November. I was like, oh, in January, I'll be back to leading groups. It was like, hell no. Okay, by March. No. Okay, by May. No. Now it's going to be September, or what is it? July, August. I am nowhere near being able to jump back in and lead groups for like my business is still running groups. We're still doing everything we were. I'm just have shuffled things around so that I'm not the one holding that space, because I was like, I am not ready for that. I don't know that I will be in another year, because it feels like my guts are still on the table. And like, that's how it's been for me lately, is like, how do I like navigate this myself and also be vocal about it in a way that's going to help other moms, but not, it feels like because there's still this huge gap, which I know that like with all the work you guys are doing is trying to close the same gap of like, how do we talk about all this messiness? But then it's like it's other women and moms helping to try to close this gap. And then we have our own guts on the table too. So it's like kind of round and around we go. And if we continue to have babies, then it's like, we're just passing the buck to each other of like, like I have a mom friend who just gave birth 4 weeks ago, and I've been supporting her, but yet my guts are still on the table. Like my nerves are still open. It's like, how do I hold space for her when I'm still dealing with this, which is another, I think, like piece of this proof of how the world isn't set up to support us as new moms, because we just have to like pass it around to each other and it just remains heavy. So that's where I've been at recently of like, okay, I've kind of like tried to table some of these, like I said, leading groups or being so vocal in the community, because it got so tiring to try to navigate my own experience and be there for this huge community of moms that I've sort of felt like I've had the responsibility to continue to be vocal about what's been going on. Like the last few months and starting in kind of May, I like got off Instagram and kind of turned more inward, because I was like, this isn't going to work long term. Like I have to I just keep thinking of like, you know, my guts on the table of like, I have to like kind of pack some things back up and be able to like carry my own babies and my own weight in my own family, if I'm going to keep fighting this fight for years to come, to like actually make a difference and not just have us pass around kind of this weight from mom to mom. So
what an incredible person you are to even recognize that and to hand off certain pieces. So people are getting supported, but you're supporting yourself, unfortunately sewing yourself back up.
Yeah.
Should you be doing that by yourself? That sounds horrible. This is a lot.
I was going to say, I feel like I've been able to lean on so many moms to help me again with that sewing myself and like kind of piecing my heart back together from kind of all this pain and grief that's been woven into this healing, which again, I feel like there is no healing without all that coming to the table, right? With like putting your guts on the table and then like putting right, like sewing back up the pieces of yourself that you want to keep and want to tend to, and then like saying goodbye to the pieces that, right, like almost, gosh, I've never thought about it like this, but like being on that table the second time, it was like I felt like I was able to leave some of that trauma from my first experience and be like, I'm at peace with how this went, and I'm gonna like leave this on the table. And like since then I've been trying to like sew back up and pick back up the pieces like that I want to carry forward, because some of them are heavy, but it's like I want to take some of that heaviness, but then like leave some of the trauma and some of the heaviness behind. And so it's that's the messy part, is like sifting through, because it's all, I use the word like soupy a lot too. Like postpartum, even 8 months in, it's still so soupy. It's like sifting through what you want to bring on your journey and what you want to leave behind and what you're still kind of like sifting through. It's like, it's so soupy and messy, and we're expected to like sift through that in the first few weeks. It's like, oh, you know, she's a few weeks in. It's like, you know, she's emotional and in bed and whatever. But then by like a month, I even felt it at 3 weeks. I was telling Krista, my doula, like, you know, I think I'm good now. And she's like, Jenny, we literally spent months preparing for your first 40 days, you know, which is like the traditional postpartum healing, at least in other cultures. Those first 40 days are like the sacred time where you should be horizontal. And like 3 weeks in, I was like, no, I think I'm good. She was like, let's talk about this. And like, I do this for a living. Like I work with moms and coach them on the same thing of like, no, this lasts longer than 3 weeks. And even doing that for 2 years and then having another baby and being in it, it was like, I felt this maybe push to like be okay sooner. And then, so after that, maybe 3-4 weeks, I was like, oh no, yeah, she's right. I'm going to lean into this soupiness and like get in my bed. And it was November. So it was kind of this like cozy, soupy time of like, just kind of skip all the holidays and like cuddle up with both my babies and like eat a lot of curry and lentil soup my doulas are making me. And I was able to lean into that. But then coming out of it has been tough for me as like spring came and winter was over. I was like, my inner winter didn't feel like it was over in this postpartum. I was like, I don't know how to navigate with the world because I was able to lean into this like actual healing and like letting my body heal. Whereas the first time that didn't happen, I was just like at 2 weeks, like, when's the next mom meetup? Because that's what we did. We held mom meetups. And it was like, at the time I had no one to tell me like, no, yeah, you're 2 weeks. Like you don't need to be doing that. So this time I was like, oh, I'm going to lean. Yes. Okay. Let me lean into that. But then doing that wholeheartedly made it kind of even harder to come back into the world because I was like, wait, now that I've felt what it's like to be held and we invested in doulas coming to our house for 6 weeks. Like I, after that kind of 3 weeks of being like, oh yeah, no, I want to participate again and feeling the nudge, no, maybe take longer. And I was like, oh yes, that feels right. Doing that for weeks and weeks and really past the 40 days, really it took like 3 months of like, I'm just going to hunker down. After that, I felt so in tune with my baby and myself. I felt so out of tune with the world. So I was so aware of the disconnect between what I was experiencing. Like I'd go to the pediatrician and it was like, they had no clue, like this amazing experience I'd been having with my baby. I tell them, you know, oh, we're co-sleeping or we're breastfeeding. And it was like, the doctor didn't care. It was just like, let me measure their head. Here's the growth chart. And I was like, I don't really care about that. Like, I want you to ask me, like, I don't know, about what I feel when my baby's on my chest and like what I feel when I look in her eyes. And I just like had this experience that I didn't get to have with my first because I was like, oh yeah, you're right. I should be sleep training at 4 months. And, you know, the first time and, oh yeah, you're right. I should have this separation because that seems like what society wants me to do. The second time I was able to lean into like, what does my baby need and what do I need? Because at that 3 weeks, instead of catapulting back in the world, I stayed in our own little world. I feel like I got this amazing experience to tune into myself and my baby. But then, like I said, it was the gap between then once I tried to emerge back in the world was like, oh no, they don't get me at all. Like, and that was painful. So I've really since then been trying to navigate like, how do I participate in the world knowing that there's like all this pain and disconnect around moms and babies? And like, I can't just pretend it's not happening, but I also can't just like be in this painful place for the rest of my motherhood. Like I want to enjoy it. So I've been really this summer, like stepping away from Instagram, continuing to step away from leading groups and figuring out how much of my heart I can put into this advocacy piece, while like tending to my own self and my babies, feeling like, okay, that's the priority right now. But like, what I've come to sort of peace with is like, I know in my heart that if I take the time to nourish myself and my own family, that's going to make it so that I can do this work long term. Like I just felt this burnout happening again with this, like passing the weight, like, or taking me back on the weight too soon, if that makes sense. But it's like the world expects me, like I have, you know, I have to make money. We have to pay bills. I have to participate in the world. I can't just like for my own mental health, sit and stare at my baby for months and months to come. But it's like, how do I piece that together with participating in a world that I feel so disconnected to, but that I also really miss? Like I miss my pre-baby self who didn't have to think about all this stuff because it was way easier before the babies got here. But now I I can't unlearn what I've learned. So
Yeah.
it's really messy. It's really magical. And I get so much poured back into me by supporting other moms.
Yeah.
But it's also a lot while
Yeah.
trying to support myself and like save the world,
Yeah.
save moms and babies. It's like, yeah, there's so much.
I have a question. I have a question, and I'm just thinking, so I've worked with a lot of moms. Feels like it keeps coming up lately. C-section experiences that cause a lot of grief. And then like one friend, she just celebrated her son's first birthday, and she's like, you know, what's so weird is that I actually keep feeling sad about the C-section, and she needed it. In fact, the baby's health was at risk in a big way, and the baby ended up needing to like go to a different hospital, and it was pretty miraculous. C-section ended up being like a miracle, and yet not part of the plan in her mind. And she didn't have the skin to skin that you're describing. I just wonder, with all the tenderness you have, like, is there anything you would say to moms like that? Anything that he's even helped you cope or anything? I love how fresh your emotions are about all of it, because I feel like anyone listening who is going through this kind of thing, or even in the last few years has had it, resonates with those tears you're crying and that messiness you're describing, and the magic of like, I want to be in this world with my family. But then what about the pain of how this all began in a way that I didn't expect?
Yeah.
What do you think about that? Or what would you say to any of them?
The first thing I think of is that no matter what kind of birth you have, there are just not a lot of spaces to like tell your birth story. Like, right. You might like tell, people ask how it went or what, or, maybe in those first few days or weeks, and you're just like, you can't even maybe process it at that point. And then it's almost like once those first few weeks pass, people stop asking, and you're kind of left with this story again. Even if it was an amazing one, you're like, I want to shout this from the rooftops. Or if you're like, this didn't go how I planned at all, and I kind of can't go there yet because I'm so fresh postpartum, and I'm trying to breastfeed, and I'm doing all these things, and the first few weeks are so messy that there's not a lot of space to even revisit your own birth story. And then like once you do feel ready to talk about it again, there's not a lot of spaces to come and say, here's what happened, unless not a lot of moms, or even the first few weeks, and be like, oh, I think that I'm going to sign up for therapy so I can process this. It's it's just, for a lot of us, doesn't happen. So then when something like maybe the first birthday or these milestones start happening, this stuff comes up, and you're kind of like, man, that was a year ago. Like, I'm feeling the stuff about it now. Like, this is confusing. Who do I even talk to about this? And like, how do I even begin to tend to these feelings? Like, so common for that stuff to come up is, first, what I would say to someone like that who's having the first birthday, who's feeling this grief around the birth, is probably confused at why after all this time it's coming up now. But it's because you kind of are forced to like pack it away at first, because you're in this survival mode, because there's such a lack of support when you get home with your baby, again, regardless of if you're recovering from surgery, or if it's your first one or not, or if birth felt traumatic or not. Even maybe like for me, you didn't think it was traumatic, and then 2 years later you have another baby, and you're like, oh, I actually was holding on to a lot of stuff. Now I have to, or I'm in this postpartum kind of grief, pain, joy space of like healing, but also like all this stuff's bubbling up I didn't expect. So something with our groups, with Centerline, and what really started in the beginning when these yoga classes started with like, that was kind of how our group like pseudo started, was let's just lead some virtual yoga. And then as we grew more pregnant, this was prenatal yoga. We started doing less yoga and just more chatting about our fears, about our worries, about, bonding over, oh my God, I feel that way too. Like, thank God, I thought I was the only one. That continued as we had our babies. And then what happened as there was like maybe 12 of us moms that were in the group around the time I had my baby. We knew we had nothing to do but go on Zoom, because this was COVID, we were pregnant. It was like, we were all just hunkered down, because we all had to quarantine up until our birth and after our birth. And of course, nothing was happening when we had our newborn babies. It was like, we were just home, and that was it. So we looked forward every Sunday to this Zoom. It was like, we got our snacks and our team. We were like, oh, we get to log on Zoom and talk to moms. Like, it was like this lifeline, these groups. And that's like how this community began. And so we all were having our babies at different times, and we got to come, and the Sunday after my C-section, which was I think it was I don't remember what day my first one was on, but that Sunday I got to come to group and tell my story, and everybody was waiting. Like, Jenny gets to come tell her story today. And like having that, I feel like I look back and because we don't have the same type of like cohort right now that, you know, we do postpartum groups and prenatal groups. I'll have a lot of that bridging of like, you're pregnant and then you come to group right after your baby's fresh.
Sure.
Like even within our community, there's like not spaces to come specifically to tell your birth story.
Yeah.
And that was so amazing to hear and watch other moms like relive everything. And I think, that is the first thing I think of, is that there's just not spaces to tell our story.
Yeah.
So it's so common for them to bubble up later. And then around C-section specifically, there's a lot of like, it kind of reminds me of like toxic positivity or like toxic, like, even like body positivity, right? Where you're like, everybody's beautiful. But then you're like, okay, if I have complicated feelings about my own body, then am I wrong for feeling that way? Or if I want to change my body, am I wrong for feeling that way? Same thing with like C-sections, where it's like, every birth is beautiful. Like, you don't need to feel shame that you had a C-section. Then if you're like, you're right. But then you're like, but wait, I'm still really disappointed that happened. Or like, I still have these feelings. I don't know what they are. It feels like maybe you kind of can't talk about that because you're like, I don't want to shame anyone who's had a C-section and feels empowered by that. Or like, I don't know how to talk about this because, okay, you're saying that, but no one's giving me the language to like navigate how I actually feel about it. Like, it's so, there's again, these gaps in like, in like support from new moms to be like, okay, here's my experience. And I want to like tend to what I'm feeling, but there's kind of only these like camps I can set up in, and there's not a lot of in between. That's one goal that our group has had. One of our values is support without judgment. So it's like, we have these group chats. We have over 40 conversations on WhatsApp, that are basically the tone we set is like, you can say anything at any time and like you'll be met with support without judgment, because like we need space to just like say what's coming up, whether it's hey, I feel grief around this C-section, and then no doubt someone else is going to say, oh my god, me too, like where do I even start? And that's kind of what I mentioned too with the support that we provide with like different groups or workshops or guest speakers, is like what I see and feel coming up in conversations. We like try to create support around, because I'm just a new mom navigating this myself. Like, I don't know what new moms need, because every day I feel something different. So it's like, the stuff that you're mentioning has like, it's all like uncharted territory, because there's no education or handbook or built-in support for these so common things and common feelings like grief around a C-section.
Yeah, that's
so
right.
It's like, I don't have the answers because I'm like experiencing it myself.
That was perfect though, because I think what you're getting at is the need for a space to talk through these things, and the need for other people to be there too, so you can have the like me too moment. Like I felt that, or I was scared of this or something. So I think that's really beautiful. And actually we did have a call in our online community, which now you're making me think I need to schedule another one, because you're right. This is so important. But we had one about birth stories, and this amazing thing happened where these two moms in different states shared their story, and then it ended up, so what happened was they had their babies, a storm hit, they lost all power and had to leave and go an hour away. These two moms were hit by the same storm, but one was in Washington and one was in Oregon, and it was when it moved. And so they both had the exact same birth story, like a week apart from each other or something. And it was just this really powerful thing of like, no way, you lost power in yours. You had to go an hour from where you had your baby. You guys had to set up in a hotel for a time. And then just to think like when you're doing something even big, like moms in different states, you still can end up finding someone who's like, I've been through that. That was so crazy and wild and painful. And now we have each other. And it was just really beautiful. And yeah, I'm going to do that. I'm going to schedule more of those, because you're right. If you can just talk it through, not that that's going to heal everything, but it does something. So then those feelings don't jump up and surprise you when milestones come. That is wisdom.
That is wisdom.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. And it's funny because hearing you talk made me think about how, you know, when we like run into, let's say, older moms or grandmas or our own moms, like moms in our life who aren't in this fresh part with us right now, a lot of times they'll like dump their birth stories on you and you're kind of like, whoa. Especially if you're pregnant and they're like, oh, I had a baby in August and my hospital shut down and the baby there was no AC and we almost died or whatever, like trauma. And you're like, oh my God, you're 70 and you're like telling me all these details and I'm pregnant and very raw. And I'm like, I don't know that I need to hear this right now. Like,
Yeah.
but what I've come to learn, especially being like, oh, I run a mom support group, like moms who are in a different season of their life, like also have these needs that maybe weren't met early postpartum or at any point in their motherhood journey. Or I feel like a lot of disappointment around moms in our life who are further down the road than us. Like there's disappointment around the ways they do or don't show up for us. Like it's all comes back to like not having spaces as new moms to tell our stories and to unpack all this stuff. I feel like if there's this window, and if like new moms aren't given the opportunity to even that have someone say, oh my God, that happened to me too. And you'd be like, oh my God, I'm not the only one. Like, even if that's the only conversation that's had, like that's better than like, no one knows what happened to me. I'm holding it inside of me. I feel like I can't talk about it, especially if I think back to, or if moms think back to, or we just think about the time, you know, different times where it was even more taboo for moms to tell their birth stories or say, hey, this is hard, or this was traumatic. It was like, well, you should just be grateful that you have a baby. Like I've even been said that by moms in my life who are older, who are like, I'm like, man, this is hard. They're like, well, at least you got pregnant, you know, so-and-so can't get pregnant. I'm like, okay, like, I guess I'll be quiet and pack this in. I feel like that's so common. We feel like we can't talk about it. And then it just kind of gets, right, like a lot of stuff in our lives shoved down deep. And then I notice moms, later in life are like bombarding us with their stories. And I'm like, it's taken me a lot of like patience and like, again, this kind of like unlearning of like, oh, like they shouldn't be doing that to me. Like I'm a new mom and they shouldn't be like telling me this. I'm like, okay, I need to have an understanding and an empathy for like their needs are probably not met postpartum. And like, that's coming up for them now. And that's not their fault or mine. It's a disconnect in our world. And like, that kind of fuels me to be like, okay, I don't want one to grow up later and like put stuff on my daughter that like I didn't tend to. That's like fuel to like keep doing this work and kind of keep myself open instead of like packing stuff away and just like putting on a smiling face and like trying to fit back into those jeans and fit back into my old roles in my old life and like pretend like nothing happened. So it's like trying to keep kind of this rawness open, or at least like a sliver of it to be able to access it so that it doesn't just like harden and then like manifest later. And I like, you know, feel like I have to dump it on my own daughter, or like I can't be there for her in these ways. I just like see that in my own life. And then, like kind of taking that responsibility off of ourselves as new moms, even moms who are later in life who are like carrying around this stuff. It's like, this is not your fault. This is not our fault as new moms. Like that C-section was not your fault. And like being okay to have complicated feelings about motherhood. But like, for me, it's like trying to do something about it is what's helping me heal from it, and feeling like I'm not just saying, okay, world, this is how it's going to be. Like motherhood is hard. Okay, let's, you know, like again, put on a brave face and get through it, because we can, because we're women and we're strong and we'll do it. But it's like, what if it were different? That's like fueling me to be like, I see a different world later on. I see a different world for my daughter. That's also so heavy and so much responsibility. So it's like, how do I like pick up pieces of that sometimes, but not like carry the world on my shoulders? I feel like you guys probably feel that too with working with new moms. It's like, God, this is a lot. Like, gosh, will we, you know, by the time my daughter has a baby, will she have like appropriate maternity leave? I don't know, but like, I have to try. It's like how I feel. So that's like, where kind of fuels me to keep going and to keep, there's so much that comes out. It's like, I don't know. I think sometimes I think of like, how can I make the biggest difference? And it's like, I think my background is in school counseling. So like I have a master's in counseling and have worked in like social service settings and schools and different nonprofit avenues, but like crisis work too. Like, there's so much we could talk about as far as like how to like start to fill these gaps of support that moms and babies need. But when I switched from school counseling to working with moms, it was like, okay, instead of working with kids, if I take it a step further and work with new moms, and that can like help with these teenagers in high schools that I'm helping, like that can take it at maybe prevention a step further. If we help their moms and parents are more equipped to raise healthy humans, right? And mentally, emotionally healthy humans. And so I think about sometimes like, okay, where could we even take it a step further? So I'm like, okay, helping moms, but then also like sex ed curriculum in high schools. What if we
pre-baby
moms, like what if we teach like high school kids about matrescence and about motherhood and about breastfeeding and normalize these things? So then when you're having sex and having babies and growing up, you have a foundation of what might happen. Like, how would that change the world so that less people have babies and feel alone and blindsided? So that's, what I try to think about is like, how can we make the biggest difference? Because man, there's a lot of work to be done.
Yeah. Well, what you're describing is the only avenue via which we get anything. Even those moms above us who are doing the thing of spewing all that trauma and giving advice out of needing to like either justify what happened to them or because they're still scared or like what, like it gets funky. Even they, like, we get to talk about this like this because they a little bit more.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, it's just those layers of things. And what you're describing, even just in the imagining, what could be different for these little girls now? Like now these are these little girls and they're going to grow up and be us next. And like your imagination is impactful, and the process that you're going through, Jenny, like you specifically, this hero's journey that you're on, like shifts the forward movement of life for this little girl who comes behind you. And then all of this activity, like even whether or not we hit exactly what we're aiming for, the aiming and the generation, like the generating of energy behind aiming forward, like this is how it moves forward for them. Like you're doing it now from your bed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you guys too, like truly.
Thank you.
It feels, really important, these conversations. And I'm of such like an abundance mindset of the more groups, the more support, the more communities, like, it's, just like we need more and more and more. There can never be enough. Avenues of support for new moms.
Can we shift in the last like 10, 15 minutes to, I do want to talk about the story of VBACs at Cottage, maybe because it's just like a pet subject on my brain all the time, but maybe just because like, I mean, I just think it's a good metaphor for like how it has been and what the bridge is toward the future. And moms were talking about this when I started at preschool, like 10 or 11 years ago. There are fifth graders now whose moms I talked to being like, no, I'm going to UCLA because I really want to try for a VBAC and I'm so excited about it. But what they're trying, like that conversation was them trying to figure out like, okay, my older child is at this preschool and they're going to stay behind. We're going to get a hotel 2 weeks before the birth in LA and my sister is going to stay here. So my sister is going to be doing drop-offs for 2 weeks and hopefully the baby will come in the 2 weeks that I've scheduled a hotel to be at UCLA because it's the closest place that I can try to just like push this baby out.
Wow.
Yeah.
Like it is out of control. And for some of them, no, the baby didn't come in the 2 weeks and they got a cesarian at Cottage because like you just do your best, but you can't.
What you're describing with all that coordination, like thinking about moms who don't have the means for a hotel or don't have a sister to watch their baby. It's like they have no option but to go have that unnecessary C-section. So a little background on that is that so in Santa Barbara, our one hospital is Cottage Hospital. And I am very new to this advocacy and this effort to help with this issue. Really the past year, I've been trying to be instrumental in changing things through the community, through my own platforms. But many people here have been fighting for years, like over 20 years, to saying to Cottage Hospital, a VBAC ban is not it's not okay. It shouldn't be allowed. It isn't allowed, but there's so many layers there. So over 20 years ago, the hospital system changed here. There used to be multiple hospitals. It turned into just one private hospital, which is Cottage. And when that happened, they said, we don't allow VBACs here. So vaginal birth after cesarean, again, like I mentioned. Yeah.
If I can interrupt you.
Yeah.
It's not that in the city of Santa Barbara, there's one hospital. It's that in the surrounding several counties, there's only one hospital.
Wow.
So Santa Barbara's little and it's almost impossible. It's not almost impossible. It takes forever to get any kind of care in Santa Barbara because even if you're a resident and you're like, well, the clinic is down the street from me, everyone from these surrounding counties is coming to get every single kind of medical care. And then Cottage has this like really beautiful birth program, but it's also the only one. So it's super packed. And so then what they decide like really affects a huge amount of people like from the whole surrounding areas because there's this like desert of medical care.
Yeah. And why did they decide that? Do we know? Is it just logistical? Like if then they can plan C-sections and then it functions like a machine?
Yeah. So I don't know the background on why the decision was originally made, but if you ask them, it's like they say like, we don't have the staffing or the support or the guidelines. Like we don't meet the guidelines of the ACOG, like Association of Obstetrics, like whoever decides what what hospitals are allowed to do in terms of birth and labor.
Okay.
So they're like, we don't meet the guidelines for what ACOG says that that we need to have, like as far as our hospital and our equipment and our staff to say that VBACs are safe here. And yet, so the problem with that is that they're a level 1 trauma center. So it's like the issue with a VBAC is that the concern would be if someone like me had a C-section. I have a scar, obviously. There have been layers and layers sutured up in my body, and then my skin and fascia, on the top. So the issue would be, or the concern is, if I get pregnant and try to birth a baby vaginally, that scar is going to burst open, and then there's complications from that, right? So that's the concern. But most hospitals in our state and in our country allow VBACs. Some smaller ones do not, or they require certain like standards to be met before a mom can come in for a TOLAC, which is a trial of labor after cesarian. So the VBAC is that's the birth that would happen if someone like me gave birth vaginally, and the TOLAC is the trial of labor. So to have a TOLAC, some hospitals require certain things to happen. So Cottage is saying we don't meet what those things are. But if the issue is, if they're saying we don't meet the standards to address someone's uterus tearing open during a vaginal birth, if that were to happen, first of all, it's very unlikely. The statistics around complications with having a C-section are more likely than your uterus bursting open during the birth. So it's like, okay, if we're looking at these two things, like where is our priority here? Because if priority is moms and babies, then we're going to do less C-sections, because statistically, if someone like me has a second C-section, I'm way more likely to have complications than I am for my uterus to burst open, especially if I meet all these other, let's say, okay, let's be strict about it. I'm under 35. I'm otherwise healthy. I have no other complications. All these things that if I check these boxes, the argument is I should be able to have this TOLAC and try for a vaginal birth if that's what I want. I can also opt for another C-section if that's more empowering to me. There's no right. If me and my doctor decide that's the better choice, great. But if me and my doctor decide, or just me decide that I would like a TOLAC, I'd like to have a vaginal birth, I should be able to do that if there's no other concerns. So this hospital saying you're not allowed to is a violation of my rights as a human. So what's been happening, but that the hospital has said for years, oh no, that's not happening, is because the issue is also that, like Lane said, there's not a lot of hospitals close here. I'm going to Ventura or I'm going to Santa Maria which are both, let's say, an hour away. And if I'm in labor, I don't want to drive an hour, right? Like that's unsafe. So if I were to show up at Cottage in labor, what I was told by my doctors here this past fall, when I was still hopeful for a VBAC, again, it couldn't happen for me, but I was saying, okay, what will happen if the hospital's still not allowing it and I show up in labor? Like, what'll happen? They can't, let's say my baby's head is out. You can't give me a C-section. They're like, well, we will birth your baby. We have to do that. Like, okay, great, thanks. But we will deny you an epidural because we don't do VBACs here. It's like, okay, hold on. You're going to withhold pain meds from me because I'm showing up in labor after a previous cesarean, even if my baby's halfway out and I'm requesting an epidural. Like, that seems like more than just, oh, we don't meet the standards of if you're denying me pain meds for this thing that's happening, then that seems fishy. So that's what I was coming up against when I hadn't really thought about this issue personally. Even having my first cesarean, they maybe mentioned to me like, oh yeah, if you have another, VBAC isn't an option here. I was kind of like, wait, what? But they didn't give me another option as far as, no, your baby's breached, so you're having a C-section. So I had it. And then later it was like, wait, would have I gone to Ventura, which there's a couple providers who will do breech births down in Ventura. I probably would have considered that. Again, it was COVID and I wasn't looking to go to another town to have a baby. And, again, to advocate for moms who don't know that that's an option, or don't speak English, or don't have a car, or don't have support. Like, none of those are options. You're having a C-section and then you're likely having your second one. Not advocating, or okay, I'm going to not tell my doctor and wait till I'm in labor and then show up there and then deliver my baby, even if they make me sign paperwork that says we don't agree with this. And then I'm going to that's not the way I wanted to have my baby. So I was like, even if I am going to opt for this TOLAC, I'm going to go elsewhere. That was my plan. And then for me, my baby ended up being breech, and I have a bicornuate uterus and just a couple of complications that I was like, okay, a breech, like VBAC, bicornuate uterus birth isn't something I'm comfortable with. Like that felt like a lot. I was like, do I just birth at home if Cottage is going to say no? Like, and, you know, pay out of pocket to do this if they're going to violate my rights in that way and like give me that birthing environment, like that's not what I want. But yeah, for me, that C-section ended up making sense. But for people who, I know so many moms who just opted for the second C-section because they were told that was their option. They're like, I don't want to birth an hour away and coordinate my baby having care. And I don't know when this baby's coming. And I don't know the doctors down there. So for 20 years, this has been happening. And some moms have gone in and said, I'm having this baby here. And they're met with a resistant environment and they have their baby, or they end up in a cesarian even after going in and saying, I'm in labor, I'm trying. And then they'll say, oh, you're not far along enough yet. No, we're just going to go ahead and do the C-section. And then, of course, you go to a hospital. When I stepped into the hospital to have my C-section, it's like, they didn't tell me where to go, where to walk to get my surgery. It's like the minute you step in, at least for me, it's like your power is kind of stripped away from you layer by layer. At least for me, that's how I felt. It was like this environment is trying to like push me out of this like place that I'm standing in, that I'm saying, no, I'm going to have the birth that I want. For me, my experience was like not the people there or my doctor. Like, I think all those people are standing for women and babies and doing incredible work. But this sort of system that that a lot of us are forced to birth within or think that it's our only option, like is set up to kind of knock us off of that like power that we feel when we're pregnant and birthing. And like naturally it's like a amazing, powerful, like, it's like, for me, it felt like this is like what my body's meant to do. This is amazing. But then these systems that are like here to apparently support me in this birth and help bring this baby to the world and help me become a mom, like feel like every little step is like, I'm getting nudged off of that place that I feel like I'm standing in my power. So for like going to this environment and having a hospital like ours say, no, we're not going to give you pain meds. Like we're going to like coerce you into this surgery. Like that has, ignited so much rage in me, like finding out that was happening and then being like, not only is this happening, this might happen to me. I'm pregnant and this is happening. And like, I'm going to talk about this. So like part of my sort of platform for Centerline was talking about that during my whole pregnancy and was like, well, how is this going on 20 years? I just moved here 5 years ago and I'm just learning about this. But like, how has this continued to happen? And then learn there's this whole network of people who've been working to reverse this ban. So there was some sort of pressure on the hospital last summer to reverse this ban. I don't remember the catalyst for them. It was like maybe word was finally getting out after 20 years, like this is happening and it's not okay. And I even spoke to a couple attorneys in town to be like, they approached me and were like, do you want to help us like make this, like force their hand to do this? Because like your situation, we could kind of use this to like use this platform and your voice to like help this issue. And I was like kind of hesitant. And because again, I'm scared of like, this is the only hospital in town. I don't want to show up there. And they're like, you're the girl who was vocal about making that, I'm like, I'm trying to birth my baby here. I don't want to be like in bad standing with the hospital, which is again, another big issue that I'm made to feel that way, or show up at my doctor's appointment and have them know that I'm the girl who's speaking out. Like that's not okay. Crazy. that I could feel unsupported in that way. But so they announced that they were going to reverse this ban last July, the 14th. So over a year ago, that they were like, Cottage Hospital's reversing the ban. Because I think they felt some pressure somewhere and finally said, we're going to reverse it. So everyone was like, yay. But then a lot of people who've been fighting this fight for so long were like, not so fast. Like, we want proof. Like, show us it's an option. And so someone like me who was pregnant and due in November, I was like, is it an option? Is it an option? Is it an option? No, still not an option. I have all these messages from, the digital doctor communication portal we have here. Like, no, it's not an option. No, yes, you'd be denied an epidural if you show up there. I was like, man, like, when is this going to happen? Didn't happen for me. Anybody birthing around my time, still through this spring, through this summer. And a couple weeks ago, so every like 6 or 12 weeks, I call the hospital just to be like, hey, is VBAC an option? Because I'm just like, someone has to hold them accountable. Like I can take that upon myself. Like that's a job I can have because this isn't okay. And I, went through that whole pregnancy and was let down that it wasn't an option. And again, there's so many layers to how unjust that is to just the whole situation. And especially when you think about the area that we're in and the level of education and wealth and resources in Santa Barbara and among like over probably 50% of our population who is the Spanish speaking, low income, less resources, like this mom who doesn't have options. It's like, I got to fight for her and for all of us.
Yeah.
So I've been calling all year, all pregnancy, last pregnancy, all spring, all summer. And then I finally, a friend was like, I think they finally made an official change. Call again and ask. So I called, and the nurse said, yes, that is an option here. I was kind of like,
Yeah.
what? Like,
Wow.
are you sure? She's like, yeah, they put out the, new protocol to us staff, and it's an option. It's like, okay, like, where's the press release so that moms know? Like, how do the moms know? And they were like, I don't know. I'm a nurse. I'm not a PR person. Like, call our marketing office. I'm like, okay, haven't done that yet, but I'm waiting for a release or something, because it's like, okay, now you're allowing it, but you're not telling anyone. Like, how shady is this? So, like, back to Jess, what you asked about, like, why there's so many like gross underbelly theories of like, well, the hospital makes more money off of surgery,
right,
so they want more moms to have surgery, which who knows if that's the case. But like, all I know is that moms and babies are not being prioritized in an institution like this, where if it's taken a year for you to say reversing this ban, and then you're going to force hundreds of more moms to have C-sections they don't need, like that to me is, we're prioritizing something over moms and babies, and whether that's money or whatever. And that is such a prime example of like how the world around us operates, right? Like we live in a capitalistic society. It's like we prioritize money and profit and production. And as a mom with a new baby, that's so the opposite of like what for me has been like bubbling up from like my deepest inner parts of me, right? It's like I feel more human than I ever have having babies. And yet I feel a bigger disconnect to the world around me. So like for me, that's just like, I'm trying to help moms navigate like all this messiness and these really big issues. Like we mentioned, maternity leave, healthcare, like these are things that matter. These are life and death. And like all the way down to like one mom's experience with her new baby and giving her permission to, like I had, have her on her chest instead of create separation immediately. It's like, we have so long to go between getting the world to that place. But like if kind of one mom or one community at a time, we can like normalize the feelings we're having as new moms and like start to create a ripple effect to like to bridge some of these gaps and empower moms to lean into what they're feeling instead of feel like they're forced to have surgery or choose this way that feels unaligned with them, or separate from their baby immediately. Like that I feel like is like, I feel like all of us probably feel that is like that makes this work meaningful and worth fighting for, which for me recently has been like, I need to take a step back to tend to myself to be able to keep doing that, because it feels like the most important work of, I feel like that's how we change the world, is changing the way that the world supports, or right now doesn't support moms and babies. It's like, it feels like there's nothing more important. That's like I never thought this would be my life right now, is like, being in these spaces with moms and like talking to people like you and talking about birth day in and day out. But it's like it's at the forefront for me of everything.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that. That's so important.
And I just want to commend you for doing the really hard thing of making sure that work starts with yourself and your own experience. I think that a lot of leaders of movements and change makers in the past, when we go to like study them as people, we find out like, oh, actually not in their own house. Look at all this work that they did, and thank you to them for that. But oh, bummer that their own marriage was whatever, or that their kids didn't see them, or like whatever. And I feel like the seed of like the new way as we move forward has to be what you're doing, of saying like, my advocacy starts with my body and my baby and my experience and other people, but not just other people, like also me.
Not at the cost of myself.
That's so
which is hard to learn. It's like I feel like as women taught to do things at the cost of our own well-being and like, give and give. And so that feels backwards to be tending inward instead of like, even sometimes with my own kids, I'm like, mom needs space, mom needs a minute. Like that feels backwards. You feel like, oh no, I need to give everything. It's like, I give everything, I can't keep going.
You have nothing.
And that's just the truth of it.
That's right.
Yeah, and you deserve to be well.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Jenny, it's such an honor to hear these stories from you. I
know,
feel
there's
so
so
full
much
and
more.
so emotional, and I'm so grateful. I'm so excited for everybody else to get to listen to you and hear themselves, and then also hear the future in this. So thank you so much for making the time to do this with us.
Yeah,
Oh
thank
gosh.
you. And thanks
Thank
to your
you.
husband for taking the little one so you
Yeah.
could do this. Just, I know it's a whole team effort that you're doing it, and we really appreciate all of you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, this is like conversations like this light me up. So I'm just so grateful that you guys are like, I'm so grateful for the community that you're leading, Jess, and the conversations that you guys are having, and all the work, Lean, that you've done with Centerline. I feel like, again, this just like abundance. I feel like the more that we can get together and talk, it's like that ripple feels like it gets stronger to like creating change. So keep doing what you guys are doing. It's amazing work.
Thank you.
Thanks,
You
Jenny.
too.
Yeah.
You heard in this episode the significance of having community, of specifically being able to share your birth story with other moms who get it and understand. And we want to personally invite you to join Very Good Mothers Club. We have an online community. If you're in LA, we also have in-person meetups. We want to be able to support you in the exact ways we're talking about in this conversation. We do calls in the online community via Zoom where we do share birth stories. It's really moving and powerful. And if this sounds like something you want to do, you're more than welcome to join us.
Yeah, and we host a call every single month that is specifically for listeners of this podcast. So if you heard yourself in any of what Jenny had to say today, kind of especially if what came up for you was like, oh, I really don't think that I've processed that. Like, I just want to kind of personally invite you to whatever month you're listening to this. Like, we're doing a call and it's on the schedule, and you can go look now and meet up with us the very next time. And we would love to just like hear that with you and hold it with you.
Yeah. So join us. We would love to meet you. And thank you so much for being here. Okay. Bye.